My goal tonight is not to actually keep us here very long. This has been a big travel day, but rather is to get us thinking and primed for the week so that each person who's here will be prepared to understand why you're here. We don't want to enter a week without understanding why you're here. I'm also the deliverer of bad news. I'm Irish Catholic, and so I like the darkness, and so they assign me the task of sort of thinking through the difficulty of what we're trying to do this week. But I want to start with an opening exercise, and I know that the lights here make this somewhat difficult, but the other option I noticed earlier made the room look too dark. So we will send out the slides to you after the fact. We have all your email addresses, and you can get copies of them if you want to get a text, or I can send it to you whenever you like. But I want to start with a quote from Sacrosanctum Concilium, which I think is a rather intensive claim, especially when I think about my own participation in Sunday Mass in my parish, which is mostly at the back, holding a 1-year-old as she toddles around. The liturgy through which the work of our redemption takes place, especially in the divine sacrifice of the Eucharist, is supremely effective in enabling the faithful to express in their lives and portray to others the mystery of Christ and the real nature of the true church. It's quite a claim. That's quite a claim. What I want to start with is a discussion amongst your various table groups about why do you think it's so difficult for our parishes to enact this vision today? Sometimes I read Sacrosanctum Concilium and I think to myself, this is amazing. But then I go to parishes and I think, that is not what I saw. That's different. There's a sort of different feel to it. That it's not always clear that it's supremely effective in enabling the faithful to express. So why do you think, what makes it hard? And so I want to give you about 10 minutes to discuss that at your tables, and then I'd like to hear from 3 or 4 of you. So go on ahead.
It will. Yep, great.
Another minute or so. I'd love to hear from some of you what you talked about. I love this moment. There was no conversation. Everyone was just talking about the weather, about the World Cup, England's big win today. Header in the 91st minute, stoppage time. Who would like to say something publicly?
A couple different thoughts. One,
Why don't you introduce yourself and where you're from? And this, I assume you're going to win from the furthest away.
Yes.
hello, I'm Marianne Daly. I used to be in the U.S. and I'm now what's called an American Kiwi. So I came from Christchurch, New Zealand.
Wow.
we do quite a bit of sacramentalizing without evangelizing. One of the challenges. The saturated society, we fill ourselves with everything but Christ. Thinking back to the royal wedding, my time zone, it was like between 11 and 12 p.m. after a marriage education weekend, and I'm in bed and I'm saying, amen, amen! And my husband's like, shh. And then you watch social media and people mocking that preaching that I felt was from the heart to the couple and to the world. And also wondering if that the preaching does not itself speak of God's mystery in the life of the preacher and the community. We're going to other sources and reading other people's work rather than having that, recognizing the mystery or the search of the mystery within the life of that community.
Great. Maybe not great. Other things.
Mike from Milwaukee. We talked about a lot of things. One had to do with how much people understand about the liturgy. We talked about the difference between pre-Vatican II, where there was a lot of awe and mystery, and people will often say that there is no awe and mystery now, and in fact, there's just as much, if not more, if only we were aware. We talked about how if people knew more about what was going on, if they had a better liturgical catechesis, they could better enter the mystery that's going on. We talked about boring mass with boring people, and that you got to bring something to the table. If you want to get something out of something, you have to give something. And also about the specifically, commenting on expressing in their lives. That idea of expressing is not necessarily comfortable to a lot of Americans in the culture. We are a more privatized kind of people. And so to think of just sharing anything, one of the comments is people are comfortable talking about sports and what's the second thing? Entertainment. And you can talk about that with anybody pretty much any time, but to talk about something that really matters about faith and where you're at with that, it's just not a popular topic. So expressing oneself, particularly communally, is countercultural and not a comfortable place for us yet in church.
That's great. Sister Carmen, and then I think Brian has his hand up. I know Brian, that's why. I also.
On behalf of our table, we spoke about the idea that the reality, we have words that we use up there, which are wonderful words, like sacrifice, like mystery, but words like community, we can say it, but our parishes generally are not communities. They're not connected individuals. So that when we speak of these realities, there's not an existential experience of it. We also said that the language is not a language that is understood. Like she beautifully brought out the idea of sacrifice and of mystery, but the popular concepts of sacrifice and mystery are like whodunit and yuck, instead of something really profound, so that different kinds of words and concepts have to be used to convey the mystery, the profound reality. Also pointed out was the issue of people doing things in a certain way, and when you end up with new people in the parish or new groups in a parish, how to integrate and breathe and bring about an openness to what that other community might be able to bring. And our wonderful cantor echoed this, not in song this time, but in wonderful words. So that was where we went with what are some of the issues that need to be dealt with.
Those are excellent, thank you. Ryan, and then we'll have one more after that. So be ready, the person who is after Brian.
Hey, I'm Brian. Yeah, we talked a little bit kind of what was said at this table, kind of springboarded from there. That was sort of those who kind of ostensibly were promoting the liturgy of Second Vatican Council, and then versus a more quote-unquote traditional approach. And then we talked about it some more and kind of, I think, came to an agreement that there's enough room under Sacrosanctum Concilium for both, and it's a focus on that sort of factionalism that precludes an effective evangelization to some extent. So, and especially when we think about people today, our children or our grandchildren who don't even go to church. I mean, if they believe in Jesus or that Jesus is real, that's good. That's a big win today. I mean, we got big problems that we need to address.
Brian is going to give the talk after me, which is even darker.
And I'm Rita from Denver, and at our table, one of the things that I'd like to add is we were talking about the nature of individualism in society, which is making us come to the Eucharist with the idea of what's in it for me, and if I don't get anything out of it, why should I be here? As opposed to what can I bring to the Eucharist. So I think that's one more layer of that. We also said that the preaching that we hear is often at a rudimentary level and doesn't feed the needs of those who are catechized already to take them deep.
Yeah, thank you. Well, those are excellent. In some ways, they take away everything else that I was supposed to do tonight. So, but if you don't mind, I'll do it anyway because that's why they pay me. I wanted to focus on two of these themes. I'm going to put much of what was said tonight under two kind of concepts related to forgetfulness and fragmentation. I want to start with, I think, what is probably a very well-known, I mean, certainly everyone here knows it, which is a speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which he gave on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And I want you to just pay attention to the speech. Just listen to it.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream come true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the hiking Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped mountains of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the prevalent slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring when this happens. When we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
What's stunning about this preaching, not speech, it's probably wrong to call it speech, this preaching is the degree to which Dr. Martin Luther King was drawing on tropes that were assumed to be normative in American life. The Declaration of Independence, the spirituals and hymns that were known by people, prophetic imagery from the prophet Ezekiel and from Isaiah. There is a sense in which there's a cultural memory being employed prophetically to diagnose racism in the United States and give it a space to transform it by dreaming of something else, by coming together under a greater desire, which is the union of men and women in love. I find it hard to believe that this speech could be given today in the United States, at least in a way that anyone would have paid attention to the whole thing. Who knows the Declaration of Independence? Well, Notre Dame football fans do, because they say it at the beginning of every game. But other than that, who knows? Often not my students. Who knows Isaiah or Ezekiel? I'll tell you who does not. My students. They don't know Genesis 1:1. They haven't read the scriptures, most of them. Even those who've attended Catholic schools have no memory of having encountered the Bible. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but they are few and far between. Further, they think about religion not as something that brings together, not as something that has a capacity to transform, but as something that divides, that leads to violence, that leads to disunity. We, in our age in the United States, are undergoing a crisis, and we're not unique in this crisis, of forgetfulness and fragmentation. We don't have a cultural memory that we can draw on, and we are at odds with one another in a remarkable way, and this fact is true in the church and it's true outside the church. If you pay attention to trust in institutions in American life, no institution is trusted by Americans. Actually, the church is most trusted, but as you might imagine, Congress, the media, the office of the presidency have almost virtually zero trust amongst Americans today. There's a real sense of fragmentation and even a forgetfulness of a narrative of what it means to call oneself an American. Well, this is also true in the church. It's always happens. What I'd like to do is just introduce some ideas for you to play with for this week, to keep in mind about forgetfulness and fragmentation. And the first thing I want to do deals with secularization. There's a kind of story that exists that secularity is a matter of disenchantment. Once upon a time, there was a kind of transcendent capacity in the human person. Then the Enlightenment, everything was terrible, human beings lost this capacity, and there we are trying to find the transcendent. And to a certain extent, you can explain that we're trying to find it in various ways. I watched the World Cup today. I watched Tunisia. Their fans were seeking the transcendence in a loss to England. I mean, to see them, there was this sort of sense of like going out of body. They were all sort of dressed in actually very ritual modes. Somewhat intimidating, actually. Not the English. The English were just dressed like English people. But there is this sense of disenchantment. But in fact, we know that this disenchantment actually isn't so much the case. People still desire transcendence. They still look for mystery. They still long for love. They still have to deal with the death of a loved one. Rather, secularization, as the French sociologist Daniel Leger argues, is a matter of forgetfulness. I'll explain this. The problem of transmission, whether in culture or religion, is a problem of a failure to adjust to the educational methods used to transmit a body of knowledge. It's linked to the collapse of a framework of collective memory which provided every individual with the possibility of a link between what comes before and his or her own actual experience. So cultures have memories. We actually play this out every year when our first-year students arrive at Notre Dame relative to the football team. They are told the stories, right? So if they don't know who Rockney is, then you find out pretty quickly who Rockney is. And if you don't know who Lou Holtz is, you'll find out very quickly, primarily because he'll come here and speak and have this patented sort of list and describe how terrible of an opponent Ball State is. They'll definitely beat us, but then we were supposed to beat them, but we don't anymore. So there's this narrative that you're presented, a cultural memory, which to make sense of the tradition that you're given. Secularization is this loss of this chain of memory. Think about memory like a chain. It connects us to someone who came before. And when this chain is broken, you no longer see your life as connected to this memory. You no longer see your life as connected to this memory. Think about the Mass around us. For years, life was structured around the central memory that to be Catholic was in some sense to go to Mass. Now, I'm not one of these people that say Mass attendance has dropped and it's always been high in the past. It wasn't. There are times, and it looks like in sort of a colonial United States where Eucharistic attendance was quite low because there actually wasn't the Eucharist. So, where would you get it? You might get it once a month. And it's not clear to me that people always went to Mass for the right reasons. I worked in a parish, or my wife worked in a parish in Boston. People went to Mass in Boston at our local parish sometimes out of obligation to prove to Nona that they were at Mass. Because they would see Nona later for lunch, and if you didn't go to Mass, Nona might ask some uncomfortable questions in this sort of Italian neighborhood. So this memory, though, is gone. And it's been replaced by another sort of memory to make sense of existence, Sunday soccer. Right? That this is actually the thing that organizes one life. It's the memory that makes sense of existence. It's the thing that wins, right? Try telling a parent that, I'm sure some here have experienced this. Try telling a parent that, okay, actually this Eucharistic meeting for First Communion is required, it's on a Sunday. I know, but our kids have soccer. I know, but can't you do it some other time? We kind of were hoping you were going to Mass. We kind of had the sense that this was an important thing. So this loss of this memory, and it's not just the loss of the memory of going to Mass, but what the Mass means. I remember when I came to this realization when I was teaching this one credit course at Notre Dame on the Eucharist. And one credit courses at Notre Dame are basically for people who want to learn a lot about their faith or who need a credit to graduate. And this one credit course I was teaching was the needs is the one credit to graduate crowd. I had like 3 tennis players, a smattering of soccer players, and I had this one young woman who was a business student who actually did take the course for faith. But I was explaining what lift up your hearts meant. Lift up your heart. It doesn't mean literally ripping out your heart. It means, your heart is the seat of affection, of desire, of the will. To give your heart over someone is to give your whole being, not your literal heart. And she's like, I did not know that. So what did you think you were praying all those years at Mass? Lift up your hearts. Did you think it was some sort of Mortal Kombat where you rip out your heart and lift it up? And that's for those who play a video game of a certain era. This loss of memory is real. It's a loss of a whole Christian memory, of a story, of a narrative to make sense of life that comes to us from outside ourselves. And that's why religion in this age becomes entirely individualistic. Human beings can't make sense of your life or prove that something is true or put trust in a cultural memory. So what do they rely on? If it feels. A number of you had said something like, if I'm getting something out of it. Well, this is the basis of American religion at present. It's real if I feel it. Sometimes I'll have undergraduates come to me and say, oh my gosh, I'm struggling. I don't think faith is real anymore. I need to go on a retreat and to feel something again. And it's like, oh dear. Well, do you pray? And they'll say, well, no. Well, first they say, yes, of course I pray. Well, how do you pray? Just like every day. My whole life is a prayer. That's really beautiful. But what if you needed to pray at like certain times to actually pray? Like you needed a tradition of prayer, like the Psalms that would form you into attune your heart to affections you didn't like to have. Sure, I would prefer to pray what is man that you made him, mortal man that you keep in mind, yet he's little less than a god, from Psalm 8. I prefer that than our lives are over like a sigh, 70 years or 80 for those who are strong. Most of these are emptiness and pain. Overall, give me the joy. I don't need Monday week 4 in the Psalter. There's a tradition of prayer that establishes, it gives you a mode of experiencing life. It forms your experience rather than your experiencing being evidence that you have faith. So what we're left with is individuals seeking experiences of faith. And so there is necessarily a kind of consumerist approach to those who will come to our parishes. Does it provide me? Does it feed me? Does it feed me? That's what I said. So the Mass in some ways can heal forgetfulness by giving us ideas outside of ourselves, a new way of looking at the world. There's this cultural historian, Thomas Fowle, who wrote, when allowed to operate within a hermeneutic, that is an interpretation. Hermeneutic in graduate school, I went a long time without understanding what hermeneutics meant. But in graduate school, you were supposed to just shake your head. So yes, absolutely. That's quite a hermeneutical key you have there. It just means interpretation. It's from the god Hermes, who carries messages back and forth. That's all it means. Hermeneutics means interpretation. It's how academics feel good about themselves. So when allowed to operate within an interpretive rather than informational model of knowledge, conceptions and ideas furnish us less in the spirit of a definition than that of motivation and opportunity, with the intellectual and spiritual meanings that stand to be husbanded and cultivated further if we are ever to achieve any orientation in our own present. That is, the cultural memory of the Church is not just an idea of a fact that we're passing on, which we all know, right? It's not just a fact in the sense that, I'll give an example of a fact. I drive a Toyota RAV4. Did anyone feel themselves elevated by that piece of information? These aspects, it's not just the knowledge that we have relative to this cultural memory. It's not just that it's facts. It's a thing that helps us, moves our affect, that forms us into a whole way of life. I'll take a passage from the Mass that has been relatively beaten down. I get it. It's a complicated word. But in the Creed, we say that the Son is consubstantial with the Father. Right? Okay, everyone feel the emotions, right? I know that, like in praise and worship settings, that's the most frequently used text. Not, oh God, I'm yours, I love you so much. It's, oh consubstantiality. Okay? I get it. But let's attend to what it means to stand forth, to profess our faith that the Son is consubstantial with the Father. That the Son is God. That it not like a creature, but totally God. And therefore, when we profess in the Creed at Mass that he suffered under Pontius Pilate, he was crucified, died, and buried, that consubstantial Son is the one who was crucified, died, and buried, God. In the totalness of taking on the human condition, entered into death, out of the depths of love. That is a different way of interpreting suffering, which is, by the way, the number one thing my students struggle. Why is there suffering in the world? Why the disappearance of God? Where is God in the midst of suffering? This memory gives them a tradition that they can sort of pass on, this sort of image of sacrificial love. This image, in particular, sort of the Mass, as we'll see in a moment, as sacrificial love. And so I'm going to give an example of this. One of our tasks then is to do a catechesis that actually enables folks to connect their individual memory, their narrative, their story, with the great sort of cultural memory of the Church. And so I have passed out for you what is one of the weirdest texts ever. It's Hildegard of Bingen's Scivias. Hildegard is a doctor of the Church who was made a saint by default, which is the best way to be made a saint. Local devotion established her as a saint, and so then Pope Benedict made her saint, recognized that she was a saint. So people always talk about canonization. I think the best way to be made a saint is not a process of canonization. It's just everyone loving you locally for long enough. I mean, if people remember you existed 500 years ago at all, that's really remarkable. So that's how Hildegard became a saint. So she had these weird visions, which as I teach my undergraduates, aren't like as we think about visions, the result of that's my microphone. The result of drug use or something like that. Rather, visions were a way that you would contemplate and do theology. You would try to image God, you would make your mind open for images, and then you would sort of analyze these images theologically. And she has one in the Mass. And I'm always surprised about how moved students are by this image that I find a little freakish. I teach it, and of course I teach on marriage. So she has this image, and these are actually engravings of what her vision is, of the cross and of the great Mass sort of processing to communion. When Jesus Christ, the true Son of God, hung on the tree of his passion, the Church joined to him in the secret mysteries of heaven, was dowered with his crimson blood, as she herself shows when she often approaches the altar and reclaims her wedding. I'm just going to stop almost with that. I'll make a couple more. But students don't, they think about going to Eucharistic communion kind of like the way that you would line up to schlep somewhere, right? Like it's a sort of automatic act. I actually really like communion in Europe because it's even more chaotic than the United States is like, please everyone get into line. Whereas, if it is actually a filled church in Europe, there's more like a violent attack for communion. It's more, rushing forward of who can get in line first. It's also true in Mexican culture. But that Eucharist is an act of love that's a wedding gift, a dowry, that it's the mystery of how God brings human beings so deeply into relationship with God that it's actually kind of a nuptial relationship, a relationship between bride and bridegroom, which is really of interest to 18 to 22-year-olds. We're very interested in love and sex. Mainly sex. So they reclaim her wedding gift, carefully noting with what degree of devotion her children will receive it when they come to the divine mysteries. They come to it with a degree of devotion. That there's something, sort of a union of heaven and earth. I thought about this recently. My son desperately wants to receive the Eucharist. He's 5 years old, and he plays sort of Mass with his friends. I didn't do this at his age. This is the perils of having, I think, a theologian as a father. I was sort of mostly engaged in violent combat. So, with my brother trying to murder him. So, Cain and Abel. So we were enacting our own sort of cultural memory. But my son this week, we have a weekly battle at Mass because he wants to receive so badly. He's 5. And he'll walk forward, and he assumes perfect posture. He thought he was going to get to receive this. I feel so bad, but it's not coming, buddy. So he approached, and he had perfect posture, and the priest said, "The body of Christ," and then turned to Kara, my wife. The priest, I think, was surprised to see a 5-year-old in perfect posture for reception of the Eucharist, and said, "Can you receive?" And Kara's like, "No, not technically." But he just kept sort of screaming out at the end, "I want the body of Christ. I want the body of Christ. I want the body of Christ." There's this deep longing that's part of our tradition, that we're not just, that actually it is a total union. It is in flesh. It is in body. It is the reception of total love. And you should long for it, desire it, like not just sort of schlep up there and put your hands out. And it changes your posture. Reading this text changes my students' posture at Mass. It changes my posture at Mass. We'll get to this point later, but I would always receive in the hands, which I don't do anymore, not because I think receiving in the hands is unsacred. I always am, we'll talk about this with polarization, I'm always afraid in certain groups to receive on the tongue, because I think people are going to judge me as a rag track. Rather, I started to receive on the tongue because when I had my son, I would often feed him. And he would come forward, and the way that children come forward for food is to sort of come to you and open their mouth just for you to throw a treat in, and then move on. And I came to recognize that, like, this posture that I needed to assume before the Eucharist, that my son assumed in some ways before me. And so again, receiving on the tongue is this act. These ideas that transform us, these are not, study is not illegal or terrible. It's actually what enables to give us a new vision of the world. These are emotional, affective, volitional concepts. They're not just intellectual concepts. So we gotta reconnect people to a memory, and I hope this week we're able to do that. But I want to talk now about fragmentation, which is more fun. There is in the church a real sense, or really in politics as a whole, of a fragmentation, a polarization, and a link to politics. A fragmentation, polarization, and the political. And let me just read this quote from Jacques Ellul, who is a Reformed, then Catholic sociologist and theologian. The political point of view allows people today to escape values, to obliterate the reality of human situations, which are individual situations, and therefore no longer of interest. What is true and real is hidden under politics. People carry posters and in a leisurely way discuss future plans and revolutions. Political considerations permit us to think that we have the general solution because they permit us to do away at one stroke with all human reality and the search for truth. Think about elections. Although I shouldn't frighten you so much before you go to bed. Think about elections. Very rarely do people today have discussions about values. What does it mean to be a human being? And how does our political regime sort of reflect this? No, what you see is ideology. Republicans are this way, and Democrats are this way. And they approach all of reality in this manner, in a political manner. All of reality has to be politicized. Even something personal, something like the home, becomes political. It becomes, how do we form the family in a specific way? How do we make them live in society in the way that we think it's best to live in society? Everything becomes political. All success is judged as political success, public success. My own university, I'll give an example. At commencement every year, commencement, I'm afraid someone's listening. We are videotaping this, so it's okay. At commencement every year, commencement has become for me an exercise in universities praising itself. And the students are always sort of, please stand up, and I want to tell you that you are the most remarkable student ever. You're the most remarkable person. And now, to have success in life, you have to go forth and change the world. Which I always think is a heady thing to speak to sort of mostly hungover students on a Sunday morning. And they're like, I just need to figure out where my other shoe went. Why do I only have one shoe? But they're told to go change the world. And the merit of success is viewed at the level of social, political, cultural transformation. No one at Notre Dame was ever recognized because they had 5 kids and raised them well. No one is ever recognized at Notre Dame because they, cared for people in private and were never recognized for it. I guess that would mean that they would be recognized. So the point being is that what really matters is the political, the public, and we see that this is the way the church is treated by the media. I do a lot of interviews, and the question I always get is Pope Francis, is he conservative or progressive? It's like, I don't know. I haven't talked to him ever, personally. Is he conservative or is he progressive? They want to know which, this churchman, is he conservative or progressive? Is this parish conservative or progressive? The first time I realized that this was going on, I grew up in East Tennessee, so I had no idea that there was this fight going on in the church. Because in East Tennessee, we were under 2% Catholic, and there weren't other Catholics, and I didn't know that we were at war with one another. I had no clue. So I grew up in a parish that did, okay, everyone ready, Eucharistic adoration and benediction. We also held hands during the Our Father. I didn't know that that was a marker of identity that said, I'm a trinity or I'm not. I just was like, well, I guess we hold hands now. I prefer not holding hands. I love moving to Boston. You don't question anyone. But I didn't know that there was this sort of war going on, that there was some sort of politicization of the church. I just knew that we were Catholic and that there are no other Catholics, and therefore, cool. Let's build our church across from the Walmart, which is what we did, by the way. Everyone's been talking about like evangelization, the new evangelization. We did that way first. We put our church right across from Walmart. In a southern town, if you know about Walmart, Our Lady of Fatima Church, as our locals called it. You go to Our Lady of Fatima? Yeah, dude. Our Lady of Fatima Church. Everyone on their Sunday grocery run will see the Catholics coming out. So this politicization of the church has had dire effects. And so I was at a conference in Georgetown last week on polarization. And Pew shared these slides, which I'm not telling Pew that I'm sharing with you. So don't tell Pew. I guess we just did. Okay, so Catholics are more likely in this country to follow their political party on Catholic social issues than to follow the church's teaching. And this is damning for both Republicans and Democrats. So, as you see here, opinions about immigration. Yes. Among Republicans, those who strengthen our immigrants strengthen our country because of their hard work and talents, 42% says yes, 47% of Catholics say yes. Are a burden on our country because they take our jobs, housing, and healthcare, 44%, 42%. And so they're more likely to take up a prevailing narrative about what it means to dwell in the public sphere from political parties. And you see Democrats are the same way. 84% are would not say this, 12 and 11. But then look at abortion. Republicans, 38%, 35% among Catholics, but among Catholic Democrats, 75% or 70% are in favor of abortion, to be legal in all cases. Our parishes aren't just big, bad communities. They actually are forming little local communal groups apart from the rest of the groups, and they're isolating themselves according to whether they're conservative or progressive. They actually choose these, of course you know this, they shop for their parish and go to the parish that actually best represents their political and social view. But they're letting their political views guide the narrative. I always remember when this was a stunning moment. I was working with an RCIA program, and we were not doing anything that was radically what you would call radically progressive. It was like, okay, here are the tenets of Catholic social teaching. And immediately the group was like, no. The poor are, like, why should you care for the poor first? Why are the preferential option for the poor? It's their fault. Now, these are catechumens, candidates, so let's give them a bit of, But this narrative is operative in so many of our parishes. It rips our parishes apart for that public witness of divine love that we can give. And not only is it political, but it's also the very nature of what it means to be a family has changed, which has resulted in fragmentation. There's a great book, I recommend it, which, by the way, it's really important that you use the subtitle because otherwise you get some terrible things on Google. David Masco McCarthy's Sex and Love in the Home. Use the subtitle, A Theology of the Household. Otherwise, especially if you're on the parish computer, bad things. Okay, but he makes an argument that actually one of our focuses on the nuclear family, one of our dangers with it is that we've actually developed a very closed notion of family life. And he traces this sociologically. The close family understands its health and well-being in terms of emotional and financial independence. Homes are set apart in a neighborhood tied together by recreational interests and practically oriented to the outside world through contracted services, salary wage earning, and consumption. So think about the suburb. The suburb is the place where people grow up. They kind of know their neighbor, but they have a large enough yard that hopefully their neighbor is far enough away. They gather on the back porch with their family. Everything is done internally within family life. This is the closed family. It's you basically engage your whole life so that you can consume. Husband and wife work. Why? To make money. Why? So they can have remarkable trips that everyone will remember forever. Right? So you got to go to Hawaii. You got to go to Disney. You got to go to. I went to Disney last year, so I'm including myself. You got to go to these places that have life-transforming experiences, and mostly life is about the household. You don't open up too much. The open household is different. And it's not that the open household doesn't mean that husband and wives care for each other and their children, but actually extends the meaning of communal life within a particular society or cultural area. I'll give an example so I moved to the real suburbs. Now, it may sound weird to say that I moved to the suburbs when I lived in South Bend, because to a lot of people, South Bend feels like the suburbs. But I moved to the suburbs of South Bend, Granger, which I said, we did it for school, and I kind of did it. Like, this was the great act of sacrifice that I made for my children and my wife who wanted this. So this was like, oh gosh, Granger. I said I'll move over the line to where the school system is. That's it. And I'll look in this one neighborhood. But ironically, we live in a cul-de-sac, and this closed household approach is dying through a bunch of young kids and families who live on a cul-de-sac. So in the morning, we all gather on Saturday morning with the kids to hang out with the cul-de-sac with coffee, and we talk about things. and they say, well, actually, this is coming up. Tim's going out of town next week. And so one of the spouses of our neighbors will say, I'm going to go to the grocery store. You need me to pick up something for me. Kids, we've started this weird thing where, like, if my wife has to go inside, the other neighbors will just watch our kids for us. Just sort of leave them there, and then later on they'll come in. We are sharing batteries. That may not seem amazing, but one of the dads last week lacked a battery, and so I went to get him a battery. And the thing about an open household is it establishes relationships. It establishes obligation. If you have all of your own batteries, you are self-sufficient. You do not need another human being to survive. And you are obligated to no one else. I am the owner of batteries. But the moment you don't, and someone gives you a battery, you're beholden in some ways to them. And this act of being beholden to someone is actually how society functions. I owe you something because I am your neighbor. You owe me something because you are my neighbor. There's a social solidarity that is at the basis of this. When this is gone, we really shouldn't be surprised that our parishes can't form communities. If you can't be in community with the person who you live next to, how are you going to be in community with the person who you spend an hour with each Sunday? So, this fragmentation rips us apart. And of course, we know that we have a tradition that doesn't allow this to take place. That the Eucharist isn't just an individual private encounter between Christ and myself. As we hear in St. Paul, in 1 Corinthians, when you meet together, it's not the Lord's Supper that you eat. For in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal, and one is hungry and another is drunk. What? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I commend you in this? No, I will not. Paul would not keep a congregation for long, I think, if he was a preacher. So we know that the Corinthians are actually gathering before, in Eucharistic history, they're actually gathering for what we might call an agape meal. So this is a meal that's taking place before the Eucharist. They're eating together. And the rich are getting there earlier because they have no social obligations, and they're actually drinking and having a party, and then afterwards, they're like, well, cool. The poor arrive. And so there's a breaking of the body. And do you think it is not the Lord's Supper that you eat? That is not the Lord's Supper. And then he gives the tradition. But you have to move on. For what is the Lord's Supper? For as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For by one Spirit, we're all baptized into one body. Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. This body language has been so misinterpreted in our tradition, primarily through stewardship programs, where it says, I don't mean this in a negative sense, but sometimes these stewardship programs are like, don't worry, everyone has a role to play. Pimply teenager who plays the trumpet. You praise God through the trumpet. You do this, you do that. Everybody takes on their role, and in the body of Christ becomes functional. It becomes functional. And thus, in our parishes, those who are disabled, those who are old and infirmed, have no role. Rather, the body of Christ, Paul's not like a metaphor. This is not like a corporate retreat Paul's giving. He's like, each of you are the body of Christ. Your strengths are this and your strengths are this. Let's do a strengths finder. No, you are the body of Christ. Not metaphorically, not that's a nice image. No, that is who you are. You have been baptized into Christ. You are dead to sin. You are Christ's body together. But God has so composed the body, giving the greater honor to the inferior part, that there be no discord in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Our Eucharistic tradition tradition in the church, a Eucharistic life, requires that we learn to suffer and to rejoice with one another. The immigrant, the migrant, who has her child taken away, should result in our hearts of a deep, radical suffering. The unborn, aborted, mothers who are given no other option but this, should make our hearts suffer. And when we go to our parish to receive the Eucharist, means that we share our lives with one another in a real way, a tender way, a gift of love that is fundamental. So fragmentation is a breaking of the very Eucharistic communion we're called to. I want to move us towards conclusion and say that one of the things that is really hard about catechesis in our age around the liturgy, forming people for this liturgical life, is the fact that people don't think about useless things as important. And I mean useless in the classical sense, not useless like kazoos. Think for a moment about technique, about technology. Jacques Ellul, again, I recommend you read him. In this book, The Technological System, writes, this environment forces us to consider everything a technological problem. At the same time, to lock ourselves in an environment that has become a system. That is, we think that the goal is to find better methods for fixing our problems, right? Like, I have an iPhone. And an iPhone comes out, and I have one right here. An iPhone comes out, and then there's a new iPhone, and now it's time to get a better, bigger iPhone. Gotta trade it in. That is not. This attitude makes it so that I think I can solve everything through the advent of technology. That part of my life is I just need new systems, new apps that actually allow me, and I don't even have to think about it. It's just how we approach life. So our catechesis isn't working. Okay, what are the new textbooks, the best textbooks that come out that can fix this? What is the most riveting new form of liturgical catechesis that we can employ? Something novel and spectacularly new and innovative. We want innovation. And the Polish sociologist notes that this causes within us incredible angst. Zygmunt Bauman writes, it's now the facility which things can be turned upside down, disposed of, and abandoned that is valued most. We're all thrown into an unstoppable hunt for novelty. If something doesn't work, we think to ourselves, we need something newer and newer and newer, and newer is better. But maybe newer isn't always better. There's something about silence, contemplation, love that can transform a good deal, that allows us to encounter values outside of ourselves that we wouldn't recognize. I was in Belgium this last summer, and I went to see the Ghent altarpiece. And I went, it was in this chapel in St. Bavo's Cathedral in Ghent, and the chapel was basically, the church was relatively empty like most of Belgian churches. They may be able to win 3-0 in the World Cup, but they don't have full churches. And everyone was crowded in this chapel because they knew that Van Eyck's altarpiece was there and that it was famous, and so you had to see it. And so when I arrived, it was closed. So the altarpiece was closed. You can see the pieces. And so it was just everyone was like, what is this thing? This isn't that exciting. But it was around the time it was to be reopened. And the curators came out, and they did something that I've never seen museum curators do, right? Museum curators are like giving tours, whatever. They opened it up, and then they bowed and left, and suddenly silence came into the place. And everyone stood before this image of the Eucharist, which many didn't know what the Eucharist. They had no idea what was happening. They just saw it. They saw something beautiful. They saw something worth attending to. So, Dietrich von Hildebrand notes, when we say that beauty, or rather those things that are the bearers of beauty, are goods for the person, we mean that these belong to the category of objective goods for the person, in which things of importance or value superabundantly overflow into objective goods for us. To see something beautiful, something that human beings took time to craft, lovingly, to hear something beautiful, is to attract people into values outside of them, to connect them to values that they didn't know. Like this altar piece. Or when you give a tour of the Basilica of the Sacred Heart and you take young kids in the first time, they always say, wow, something here matters. And so the approach we take to reconnect is to just show them that this thing, this tradition, this way of life matters. It matters. It is to offer the Eucharistic life, and I'll just close with this. The Eucharistic life is to give people a hypothesis that the Eucharist is actually the meaning of life. This is the problem, writes Julian Caron. He's the head of Communion and Liberation. This is the problem. We've been giving the gift of the most beautiful toy, that is life, all of the cosmos, but we did not come into this world with the user's manual under our arms. I often think about that I exist. I have these moments. I was made to be a philosopher, but I'll wake up and realize my life is real. Like, my life is real. I'm not a play actor. I live and I will die. My life is real. But no one told me how to live life. Like, I wasn't sort of programmed what to do. This is one of the remarkable parts of young children versus puppies. The puppy, like, 2 weeks in, is like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Cool. Like, I need a little bit of help, but you don't need to teach me much. Like, I know what food is, I know how to poop, I know how to pee. You can potty train a puppy in 15 minutes. Good luck training a toddler in 15 minutes. The human beings, it takes time. We're creatures of time. We require, we're not given a user manual. God has created us to actually learn it from each other. This is why we ask ourselves the meaning of what we see and what has been given to us. We ask ourselves how to live, how to learn to enjoy what we have, how to learn to face reality in an adequate way so that life can truly be life, intensely lived and fascinating to live. And in this sense, this is the end goal of this week. How do we form people to intensely live life out of the sacrificial love of the Eucharist, to make sense of suffering and birth and death and friendship and joy out of this gift of love that's given and a gift of love that is to be offered in return? How do we do that? And that's your task for this week, is to answer that. I have no answer. I do not know. I think that I have ideas, but I think you all have ideas too, and I hope this week is a time for us to sort of generate these ideas and to think, what does it mean to live this Eucharistic life? So I want to send you away with a question that we won't answer tonight, but I want to send you away with a homework assignment for the evening. This week, your learning here at the symposium will be your own. It is not my responsibility to help you learn or think. That's the dilemma of being an adult. I tell my students this. They say, well, this class is terrible. I didn't like this lecture. Someone read to us. I didn't like it. I said, well, that's what they did. What are you going to do in response? I hope that our lectures are engaging, but sometimes you might be tired. But your learning is your own, so you need objectives to approach it by. So name 3 learning objectives related to how you hope to discover the Eucharistic life of the Church as a way of healing forgetfulness and fragmentation. What do you want out of this week? What are your 3 objectives? And then go into those sessions prepared to get what you want out of those objectives. Because, as I said, there is no universal technical solution to the problem we're in. For some, it's going to be forming neighborhood communities like the one I suddenly found myself in which suddenly we're talking about religion and faith in my neighbor who doesn't go to Mass asked the other day, like, hey, what mass do you go to? That's not a technical solution. That's just personal relationship. It's friendship. So what do you want to get out of this? And how are you going to get something out of it? And then on Friday, when you see me again in public, you'll see me again in public, but I'll be in a discussion around what did you get out of your learning objectives? What do you need to do to get things? And then how could we as a center help you get the things you want? So our night prayer then is here, and as our tradition is on the first evening, we'll close with the Salve, the formal program, and then we have a couple of announcements to send you on your way. So Caroline will start us because it's my pitch.